Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. This is a podcast series sponsored by Arrows Group with me, Charlie Sell, the MD of Arrows Group, a workforce solutions consultancy, where I am interviewing, speaking, having just open conversations with CIOs, CTOs, thought leaders across the tech industry. The podcast is aimed at our STEM graduates listening, where hopefully we'll give you some really nice career advice as well as just thinking about what the world of technology is all about. So really great to have Christoph Heidler with me today. Christoph is the ex-CIO of SGS, a man who travels the world, lives across Switzerland and Germany, and quite a character. So really looking forward to hearing a bit about his story and his history, as well as his thoughts on, as I said, technology in a wider sense. So welcome to the show, Christoph.
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, Charlie. How do you like my room?
Yes, it's really interactive. For those listening, Christoph has the best 1950s background room you can imagine. So very cool.
Good. I did an effort.
You did. Because are you in Germany or Switzerland right now?
I'm currently in Germany. I mean, my life has all about being remote to the family, to be honest. I mean, since 20 years, I'm a commuter. I worked in Belgium, I worked in Germany, in Switzerland, some extended stays in the US. So I've always been away. Now with COVID, a lot has changed. So I'm a lot more at home than ever before. But yes, in normal times, I've been primarily traveling through the world. That's true.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's dive straight in to know a bit about your background and, a bit about SGS, but also just a bit about you, really.
Yeah, let's start probably with myself. I mean, I'm 51 years old, married with two kids, two teenagers. So I start to learn what it means to have teenagers at home. Quite an experience. I did study electronical engineering and information technology, so I'm a tech person from day one. My first job has been in tech. Coming from Germany, I worked for one of the bigger German companies called Henkel, doing washing powder, cosmetics, and things like that. And then started traveling through the world. The next job has been in Belgium, with a US company called the Johnson Controls, and so on and so forth, until the last assignment, the recent assignment. I worked 5 years as the CIO of SGS. Now, many on the podcast, many that are listening or viewing our recording here will probably ask themselves, okay, what the hell is SGS? As it's not a consumer brand as Coca-Cola or Mercedes-Benz or whoever. So maybe if you want, I explain a bit what SGS is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, as I said, I'm the headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, but SGS is a very international company with about 100,000 people in 140 countries, and the business is around testing everything that you can imagine. So from goods like toys, like cars, like mobile phones, the newest and most flashy phones that are to come on the market. We usually look after and test, and whether it's the Wi-Fi, whether it's the Bluetooth, whether it's other things. Or it can also be food, it can be blood, it can be soil, it can be air, whatever you can imagine in terms of physical or chemical testing. That's about 50% of the business. And the other 50% is about testing and auditing customer. So that could be for an ISO certification, ISO 9001 to 2701, whatever. That can also be what you know from TV, where you see someone auditing a hotel to check the hygiene or to check other things, which we call second party auditing. So it's quite amazing. That probably something that you touched today has been looked after by SGS. So it's an enormous company.
Yeah, and you're right. It's one of those businesses that you might not know as a brand name like Coca-Cola, but with 100,000 people across the world and the breadth of the different products, it really is one of those sleeping giants, isn't it?
It is, and it's fascinating to visit a lab because specifically the physical. I mean, when you visit a chemical lab, as I'm not a chemist, I don't know what exactly they are doing when they look at, in all of these things. But when you go to a physical lab and you see like an office chair being tested until it breaks, or a bike for a child that is being tested and so on, that's quite impressive. The most threatening I saw is in China, where we test toys, and you see the most fancy newest toys on the market, or you see a teddy bear that's supposed to come on the market, and we pull an eye out and measure how much it takes to pull out the eye, or you cut off the arms and then you see what is inside and things like that. So it's I think you can't take any child to these places.
Yeah. It's almost like the abattoir of toys.
Exactly. Like. I think absolutely they are traumatized when they come back. So you can't do that.
Yeah. And so thinking about strategy and running the technology of these businesses, because as I said, it's being such a large company, when you're as a CIO, where you're ultimately responsible for the roadmap, the strategic technology footprint, what are the key things that you look at your level when running a business that size?
Yeah, I think at minimum you can probably differentiate in two. I mean, there's one thing that you just need to keep the employees working, right? I mean, that could be either people working in an office, so you have the traditional PCs, networks, Wi-Fi's, Office, Outlook, whatever it takes, to SAP, Oracle, whatever the company has. You need to maintain, you need to customize, you need to set up for the specific needs in an office. Now, office people are kind of office people, whether they work for SGS or whether they work for other companies. I mean, the requirements are quite common, right? I mean, you usually work at a desk, you need a keyboard, you need a screen, you need Office and a few other toys to do your work. Now, then it comes more to the core business, and in the SGS world, again, it's laboratories. So it's close to 1,000 laboratories around the world. Where you have all kind of instruments, where you have all kind of fancy technologies that you need to incorporate, where you have to take the data, process the data, which can be very individual challenges. And the other part is where, as I said, people are out at customer premises, or people are out at a car testing station where you come to do your check. So they have, again, totally different requirements. So I think one part of the job is to keep a fairly I would say standardized environment, like an office environment, alive. And the other part of the job is then to support the core business, whether it's in a laboratory or at a customer premise, with whatever they need. And requirements change. I mean, everything becomes more digital, right? When you look at where SGS comes from, and SGS is more than 130 years old, is actually because the founders found out that what you load on a vessel, on a ship in one harbor, is not necessarily the same quality or quantity that arrives at the other harbor, because obviously there's fraud and people try to cheat the system. So the whole thing started with people just with their human sensors and primitive toys measuring quality and quantity, and then guaranteeing on the other side that it's the same arriving. Now, throughout the 130 years, more and more of what we are doing is supported by technology, right? It's a lot more fancy now, and every technology usually today produces an output. And you don't want to have a highly sophisticated toy produce a paper output for someone else to retype it again. So more and more of the job now becomes in terms of digital transformation, digital integration, because all the I would say the instruments or the measurement tools that we purchase have a digital interface and want to process data. So the job has changed quite a bit over the years, from really just supporting people with their direct, I would say, productivity suite, and now being more and more at the core, where the core becomes more digital.
And that's a really good point, because digital transformation, it can be seen as a buzzword in many cases, and I'm not really sure if people really understand the complexity or what it means when you're looking at that as technology has evolved over the years. And as you said, from being a support function, it's now a profit center for most businesses, isn't it? If you invest in the right technology, that is what drives revenue, and that's what actually drives performance and growth within a company. And I think that's where the digital transformation concept is spoken most widely about. When you're thinking about digital transformation and predominantly around networking and security, I guess, what are the key things that you think about?
Yeah. First of all, I think you're right. I mean, to some extent became a buzzword, and probably, every CIO tries to use some of them. So I had to bring it today. No kidding. I mean, in our business, it's really transforming, right? Like I said, it started always just your human sensors that you had, and supported by more and more technology. And I think there are many, many other industries. I mean, financial industry is obvious that has changed completely, and it's often disrupted now through technology. So and you see it, and I think a lot of people listening, our graduates are asking themselves, what is a good job? Where should my path go? And when you look at it, more and more CIOs, CDOs, CTOs, and so on make it on a board level, right? So you see that the importance, and you said, it seems to become more and more important. You see the importance also recognized in the jobs, and you see it also in my case. I mean, I started as the CIO 5 years ago, and then some years later I got promoted onto the board because we've been able to show the importance of IT to the core business. So your question around about transformation and security, I think that's a tricky part now, right? I mean, when people took a pen and a paper and wrote things down, yes, there's a chance for fraud. There's a chance that the data, once retyped, isn't the correct retyped, but there's less a chance that you have a security incident, that you have a security breach. Now, where everything becomes digital, you have to pay a lot of attention to cybercrime, to potential cyber attacks, and it has changed a lot. So in terms of my life, I mean, I started, and I think the only thing that we had in place were firewalls. And then when I look today at the amount of effort we are playing to keep the network secure, to keep the system secure, to prevent intrusions, to see intrusions, it has changed a lot. And there are different methods in place, and today there are philosophies that we call zero trusted networks, because at the end of the day, we don't trust anything any longer. I mean, we've spent our life in the past to protect our networks because we expected people to sit in an office, and we had our servers in eventually the same office or in a regional data center, but everything has been in a kind of closed shop. But it started before COVID, but I think latest COVID has shown why people may not sit in an office, and people may not use a VPN, or people may not use their internal network to connect, but they may sit at home. They have a DSL, fiber, internet connection of whatever kind, and they still need to be fully productive, and they need to have access down to the production system, down to the payroll system, the financial systems of the company, and still it needs to be all protected. So the risk vector has changed a lot, from us protecting our internal networks to now us protecting the assets of the company, and not trusting the network or the people on the network, because that's basically gone. I mean, it's the internet. People sit everywhere. People have all kind of devices. I mean, also when COVID happened, not everyone had a laptop. Some people unfortunately left it on the March 13th in the office and couldn't return Monday. So it took a while for them to pick up their equipment again. So they had to use their iPads, their Macs, their home Windows machines, whatever they had available. And luckily, there are technologies in place that still make it quite secure. And we were in a good position that we had started to deploy, finalized to deploy some of these technologies.
Yeah, and like you said, the security side of it, and deploying those technologies is probably the most important thing as the world is evolving at a million miles an hour, isn't it? And I remember one of the other things that we spoke about was thinking around what has changed when looking at data breaches, and how important basically securing the amount of data that's now coming into businesses, the capacity that can open. And I can imagine the testing world in SGS, the amount of data that you guys must have held must have been phenomenal. What's the most important things for you when looking at the security of that data, and then almost a bit about data ethics as well, what you have to be responsible for when you've got that much information?
Yeah, I think the most important now is to change the view from protecting the data against access from a non-authorized machine or whatever, right? For a long time of my life, as I said, we looked at, oh, these are corporate networks, these are corporate PCs, and as long as that's a corporate PC and it's on the corporate network, it can access whatever confidential data that you talked about. But that's gone. I mean, as I said, corporate networks are gone. It might not be a corporate PC that is connecting. So the whole shift is to identity, and that's, I think, what is also a recommendation to me, to people listening, is identity management becomes the key, right? I mean, it's important to say, okay, I don't know what device, I don't care what device, but I know it's Christoph, and I know Christoph is the CIO. And if he's Christoph and he's the CIO, he probably is okay that he has access to the email system or whatever. But likely he should not have access to the payroll system, because even as the CIO, I don't see an obvious reason why he would have access to the payroll system. So a lot is around now identifying the identity, and not looking at, is it the corporate network, is it the corporate PC or whatever, but really being sure about the identity. And then based on the identity and the role, to permit or not access to an application. And like you rightly said, one is, of course, the challenge is the volume of data that we all handle now. But the other one is, of course, the confidentiality of the data. As I said in SGS, I mean, we have a lot of confidential data. We have data about products that are not even on the market. We have eventually certain information about polluted oil, polluted air, polluted soil, whatever, and which obviously you don't want to make public. So there is quite a lot of confidential information that obviously would harm and would definitely be harming the reputation of the company in case something would happen. So yeah, it needs to be protected, and of course you have to protect the core. And probably there also you see quite a change, because we all had these massive data centers. We all try to protect our crown jewels on premise. But in the last years, specifically in SGS and based on my strategy, we have moved most of these assets to the cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, there are different providers, whether it's Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and so on. You can choose, but what they have in common is they are able to react a lot quicker to requirements, and whether these requirements are to scale, like we've seen in the crisis. I mean, all of a sudden things like Zoom, Teams, Skype, you name it, they had to scale like crazy, because that was all people had available. But also to security incidents, of course, right? If you have a security infrastructure in the cloud, if you have your crown jewels in the cloud, the providers can react a lot faster. And they see, of course, common pattern, and I see threats around the world, different to you in the past, just maintaining your, I'm not saying little data center, might have been a massive data center, but nevertheless, your view has been quite isolated. And there are also, security companies that now offer full cloud services. I mean, we use one called Zscaler. There are others, but it provides you with a full cloud-based security infrastructure that gives you what I said before, based on your identity, gives you private access. So it decides based on your identity whether I come with my Mac, whether I come with my mobile phone, it provides access or not. It does inspect the traffic if you want, and it of course does also the traditional filtering if you want to filter certain traffic and you want to have policies in place that you don't allow certain traffic. So it's all now moving to the cloud. I know some companies are still quite hesitant to move to the cloud, but I've been, since day one that I joined SGS, we've formulated a cloud-first policy and strategy. And we have moved our crown jewels, our assets to the cloud. We use cloud security, like I mentioned, to protect these assets. And it has been, till today, it has been quite successful. But of course, it's a race. I mean, security is a race, and you have to stay on top of it. And it's changing every day, every month. So.
Yeah, because I remember we were speaking the other day when we were talking about this podcast, and you mentioned something about the zero trust strategy or model for security. Can you tell me a bit more about what you mean by the zero trust security
Yeah, I think I alluded a bit to it. I mean, it basically means that, like I said before, in the past, you did, if you saw it's on your network, if you saw it's a corporate machine, you typically did trust it. Now it's shifting from, I don't look at the assets any longer. I look at the identity of the person and whether the person is able to authenticate. And you can have a simple user ID password, which I wouldn't recommend. You can have two-factor, which usually is a user ID password plus a one-time token sent through SMS or push messages. Or you can go further and further, add biometric data, add whatever you want to make the authentication complex. And in the zero trust concept, and I think it's a common term, but it's also what the company that I mentioned, Zscaler, is using, is really that you authenticate in based on your role, based on the policies set for Christoph, no matter from where I come, no matter if I sit on a corporate network, use my home PC, I basically, the policy is applied to what I'm doing, and I may have access to SAP, I may have access to the payroll system, or I may not, right? And that's the new concept. I don't look any longer at whether it's on the corporate network. I don't longer look at whether I know the machine. You can add it. I mean, you can add another security factor. You can still, of course, say I only want to trust corporate machines. So if you don't have a bring your own device policy, and if you can afford that you only allow people to connect with the corporate device, then of course you can add it as another level of security and say, but in these days today, it becomes more and more unlikely that you can reduce access to well-known corporate machines. I mean, I don't know about yourself and in your role, but likely you have an iPad or whatever tablet device, you won't accept that you can't do your job just because you sit on a train with your iPad. Or so I think we all sit there in this convenience versus security situation, and the zero trust concept, I think, brings quite an opportunity to still keep it secure, although you give up on, oh, it's a corporate device, it's on the network, it connects through VPN and all this hassle that we had in the past.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, you made a really good point around how when COVID hit, companies had to pivot straight away with Zoom, with Skype. Many businesses have had to suddenly embrace digital transformation, probably more than 5 years earlier or faster than they probably had on their roadmap. Thinking about SGS and when COVID hit and what you guys were doing, what were the main things that you had to really action as quickly as possible or change when COVID became a challenge?
I think the thing that we had to do as quick as possible was exactly what you said. We needed to get the collaborative tools up and scaled, right? I mean, we use Zoom today. I mean, but we were using Skype at the time and had Teams already started to deploy. So we within a few days we enabled Teams for everyone in addition to Skype, because at the time we didn't know which one will scale. And it was clear Microsoft is putting its cards on Teams for the future, not Skype, but still we didn't know. So we just offered both solutions, said, okay, well, choose whatever performs best on the day. And of course, 2-3 weeks later, we saw that all providers were able to scale up and make their solutions work. So then we at a certain time, we started to retire Skype, because I mean, Teams seems to be the future direction of Microsoft. So that wasn't obvious that we needed to get everyone enabled on the security side. The tricky part was we were allowed to keep most of the labs open. So that was okay. People were still able to work out of a lab. Or after a while, we were able to reopen the labs. So not much has changed there. But I mean, you have to imagine we have more than 30,000 people that usually visit the customer to do a certain job. And they were all home from one day to the other. And we had to find ways to see whether or not it's possible to do the same job remote. In certain cases, it might be, and we had tools like what we call remote inspection tools, whether it's a pure video or directed video situation where the customer can eventually still, as a remote arm, help you to do the job. But obviously, there are other situations where already the legislation doesn't allow do a remote job, right? I mean, it's obvious that when you have your regular car inspection, that never you would be allowed to to have a remote car inspection. Just someone went with the camera around your car and says, yeah, I think the brakes are okay. So I mean, that's an obvious. So there are certain things that cannot work purely remote, and so it has been extremely busy time to see, okay, what of the business processes are we able to shift to remote, and what is just dying, right, for pausing. Probably pausing is the better word. What is pausing for the period of the pandemic, or for the period that customers cannot or don't want to see people on site?
Yeah, and like you said, choosing the right platforms and I mean, it was a lot of trial and error, wasn't it? I think but it had to be done very quickly, and then decisions being made very quickly on the way to
very quickly, and of course in many places at the same time. And the unfortunate situation that we figured out was, I mean, we talked about security. The unfortunate situation is not only that we were all at home and eventually had more time to think, it seems also the criminal energy raised. I mean, we saw at the same time a lot more phishing attacks. We saw a lot more in criminal attacks at the time, cyber attacks, and we had to ramp up security measures while we were looking for ways to do our business. So, and again there, for example, I mean, when you look at internet traffic filtering, right? Usually, I mean, it's only happening at the corporate network, and is only happening through the corporate firewalls or whatever. Now, with the technologies that we deployed, which is part of this zero trust concept, we had been able that as long as you install a little bit of a software on your machine, we're still able to tunnel the internet traffic through secure gateways. So still your traffic is inspected and your traffic is safe, compared to you just being on your DSL, Wi-Fi, whatever cable connection, and not being protected. And we had to enable also this in the pandemic for all people sitting at home. We didn't have it in place before. And I can tell, we had discussions before with HR, for example, that HR was hesitant to get this feature enabled, although we had it in place already, because all of a sudden you sitting at home, us as a company still being able to see your internet traffic, although eventually from a corporate device, HR felt, you know, that's personal behavior monitoring and things like that, and they wanted to discuss. Not saying they refused, but we had long-lasting discussions whether it's right or wrong that when you sit with your corporate device at home, we can see the traffic. And in the pandemic, and with all the accelerated and growing amount of cyber attacks, we just went ahead and made it happen within a few days, which would have probably before taken another few months.
Yeah. Well, and well done, you guys, because that must have been pretty full on.
Well, can you imagine you have a major ransomware attack or whatever cyber crisis, and at the same time everyone's sitting at home? I mean, it's already difficult enough to fix your environment once it's in an office, but can you imagine you have to fix somehow a situation that with thousands of machines in thousands of places? I mean, it's impossible. So
I mean, and like you said, when there's 100,000 employees, that really must be quite exposing. So, would there anything you would have done differently then? Thinking, you know, we've gone through COVID now, and well, hopefully, touch wood, and vaccines around the corner. When thinking about how you guys dealt with it, anything you would have done differently?
Well, I think the one thing that we all afterwards say is, I would have done things quicker. I think that's kind of the takeaway that you always have, is that afterwards you think, why did I have all these concerns? Why did I have been hesitant? Why didn't I move quicker? So I think one of the things, of course, that you take away is, why didn't do I think so quicker? I think the overall strategy, like I said, moving to the cloud, having the massive scalability effect and ability to scale, having the ability to switch on additional security features on the fly, because it's all software defined now. You know, when you're on the cloud, you don't have to purchase a box, wait for the box to be delivered, the box installed, need a maintenance window to get the box in place, but it's all software defined. So you wanted additional security measure, we implemented things like web application firewalls, which is a deeper inspection of your traffic than a traditional firewall does. It's a software setup, right? I mean, yes, of course, you have to pay for the license, and you have to still do the configuration and setup, and you have to be careful because, of course, it can be very disruptive if you don't do it right and carefully enough. But it's available instantly. I mean, you just have to decide that you are willing to pay for it. So I think in terms of strategy, moving to the cloud with the infrastructure, with the applications, with the security stack has been absolutely the right decision. And I can just recommend whoever is going to take decisions in that direction to consider to do the same, because I think it really pays off. So the main takeaway is probably do things even quicker, but that's easy to say with what you know today, right? I mean, once you enter a certain path and you don't have the experience yet, and you're one of the first, so not many have the experience, it's you're likely a bit more hesitant. The other thing I learned, honestly, I've never been a big fan of home office. I have, to be honest, and probably because I'm 51 already, I've been a bit of the traditional people asking my team to be on site, and I like to have physical meetings and be in the meeting room. I think I've changed my mind. I don't think that exclusively working from home is the right thing, but I think a healthy balance between working in an office, being able to sit in front of a whiteboard and do some collaborative work together physically in the same room, but also have the ability to work from home where you have often more concentrated time, and you can, I can take a document and read for an hour, which I can hardly do in the office, is great. And of course, it gives you, in terms of private life and private value, it gives you also more opportunities. I had a lot more dinner with the family than I ever had before. So I think I've changed also my mind there on whether home office is effective or not. And that's certainly also a takeaway from the crisis.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on the quality of life part to it as well. I've when we've done pulse checks across many of our clients, as well as internally, and I do think that's the one thing that will hopefully not revert back too quickly is now an appreciation that people should be trusted, and trust should be given, not earned, in the fact that we can work from home and be productive. And with technology and everything we've discussed today around security and data and digital transformation as a whole, it should be laying the way forward on how we can maximize or utilize all of our tech available. And so thinking about STEM grads now, and obviously a lot of our listeners here, and thank you, Christoph, for what we've discussed, seeing it from such a high level, along with it being with a business that has so many employees, is global, and what you've had to think about when you're really leading that ship. If we take it back down to now, you said you've got teenager children yourself, so they'll be going to university, no doubt, and the advice that you would give them when they're either about to start their course or about to leave their course, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give to our STEM listeners?
Well, of course, my advice has to be go into technology, right? It's a fantastic place to be. But honestly, I think it is a fantastic place because one, it's still a growing and booming area. I mean, not many industries are still growing, but obviously the digital space and it continues to grow and will for a while continue to grow. At least that's my expectation. So if the graduates are thinking about choosing a technology path, a technology job, I can only recommend it. On the other side, you have to accept that you don't know what your job will be in a few years. You don't know what the technologies will be you are working on. And although most of us, as we are not probably visionary as Bezos or Steve Jobs or whoever, we probably don't know what will be tomorrow. But if I look back, I mean, I'm about 25 years in the professional life now after studies. When I entered, there have been technologies that no one of the graduates will even know about, which were my daily life. I mean, we had the FTDI networks, token ring networks, we had Windows 3.11, I believe, and most of the people have no idea now what I'm talking about. So I think if you're willing to enter technology area, you have to live with that the world will constantly change, and you have to keep up with the pace, and it's and that's something you have to accept. And it's also, you know, when you become a lawyer, you're probably your asset is growing with the years that you're a lawyer. So probably people say, oh, he's 25 years a lawyer, it's fantastic. Now in my role now, being 51 and 25 years in the job, people say, he might be a bit old, I mean, he might be a bit slow, and so on. So you have to live with, it's a totally different environment. I think it's fantastic if you are dynamic and you know you want to be at the pulse, but you have to also accept that you have to continue to do the race, and the race has changed. I mean, this race is a lot about security now. As I told you, everything becomes digital, everything can be hacked. I mean, the video camera in your TVs, I think I don't want to name the company, but I think that has been a prominent example where we all got a bit of a cold shower, where I think 2 years ago, it's been that one of the major brands got hacked, and the cameras that were installed in the TVs were able to be activated, and the microphones and so on. So I think you know, it's not only the classical telephone, smartphone, PC that we all think about now. It's all the IoT devices, right? It's the webcams that we have installed to protect our homes or to view whether the child are sleeping. It's the cameras in the PCs. Most of us have now home automation systems, right? Someone could open the doors or just play around with the temperature. So it's if you enter the technology space, I think one is you have to be willing to do the race, and second is you have to, like we today talked a lot about security, to accept that security becomes an essential part of this business. I mean, it's the more and more is there digital, the more and more is there room for the criminals, and the criminal is now a business, right? I mean, it's in the past it was about some nerds trying to show up and say, okay, I've been able to bring Google down or whatever. I mean, these were the examples 20 years ago where people were proud and said, okay, I managed to do a denial of service attack, I managed to bring Google down or whatever. Today it's totally different. Today it's about making money. So it's about blackmailing companies. It's about, giving the CEO a call and say, if you don't pay from on tomorrow, you won't be able to do your business. Or we have all these ransomware attacks, where also a lot of prominent examples, they had to face a ransomware attack where all their machines got encrypted, or a significant number of their machines got encrypted, and you either pay to get the key to decrypt, or you have to rebuild your entire infrastructure and eventually accept that you lose data that obviously is not on your backups. And even if you store the backups, you don't know if the ransomware was already there but not activated. So it's a business now out, and I think everyone that is accepting to approach the digital world, whether it's IoT or traditional client servers and so on, needs to accept that security becomes an essential part. So for sure, if you think about jobs that are growing and jobs important in nowadays, whether you are security or you're one of these what we call modern technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive services, you for the time being have a safe job for sure.
Yeah. And again, I couldn't agree with you more about that rise in security. So last question for me then. What would your advice to a STEM graduate to stand out when they're going for their first job? So so technology, love it, going for their first jobs. When you're looking at graduate schemes or thinking about building, what would be your one bit of advice for a graduate to stand out from the crowd for them to get their first job into technology?
That's a difficult one, because I think the challenge starts with getting a chance to come on site, right? Or whether it's now video but really having a chance to make the difference. Because if the only thing you can do is apply on an online portal, and today it's not even your CV any longer, right? Because most of the companies now use recruitment tools where you enter your data and you have an algorithm behind that filters. So you don't get the chance to put on a white shirt and put on your Sunday smile and to impress. You enter your data and you don't tick a certain mark and you're out. So I think one of the key points is try to find out as much as possible about the requirements of the job and what the company is really looking for. Because if you are a bit quick in your filling out this portal because you said, it's annoying me and I don't want to do this. It's probably taking half an hour or whatever. And you just do a bit of a copy and paste from your CV to the portal page and so on. You probably get filtered by a machine, not a human being, because you missed to tick the boxes that are important for this role. Now, on the other side, the question is, are you having these boxes? I mean, of course, I'm not recommending to cheat. I'm just recommending to maximize to maximize your chance, and to maximize, of course, the quality of your response. And that's the first hurdle. I mean, you have to get through these portals. You have to be able that at least someone starts to read maybe your CV, and eventually is going to invite you for a video interview or for a physical interview. I have not personally seen it yet, but I've read that there are also now machine video interviews where an algorithm reads your body language and of course is analyzing what's happening, which is another exciting thing, that you may not have a video interview with a human being, but you may have a video interview with a machine. And I don't know how to maximize your potential there. I honestly don't know how these algorithms work, but you have to accept it. The world is changing. It's not about the white shirt and the Sunday smile any longer. You have to take all these hurdles. And probably when you have the big names, like I mentioned, the Coca-Colas or whatever of the world, if they post a job opportunity, you have not only any longer, it might be in London, but you don't have people from London apply, you have people from all over the world apply. So you compete with an enormous number of candidates that come from all the world. I mean, when you compare to my times when I said I started my career at Henkel, it has just still been a newspaper post that I responded to. So there might have been 50, I don't know, 100 people that applied to it, which all came from this region here because it has been a local post. Now when Henkel is posting a job on LinkedIn or wherever they post, they will get 1,000 applications from all over the world. So the competition has raised, and you have to accept how the machinery works. And the machinery is now a lot driven by algorithms on recruitment tools. So that's unfortunately what you have to go through. The other way to avoid it is use your network. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using your network, right? Whether it's your own network, whether it's a friend of a friend, the father of a friend, whatever you can use, that's the only way to eventually avoid the official channel. That still means you have to, present your package but at least you may not go through this online portal algorithm evaluation. So the other recommendation is use your network. I mean, as you said at the beginning, I'm ex-CIO of SGS. I've been there 5 years. I'm changing now. I'm still looking around what exactly I'm going to do, and I'm primarily using my network. Yeah, there are headhunters and there are firms specialized in doing it, but the business is changing there. More and more is not advertised. More and more you just learn through your network. And I think that's the other recommendation. Don't only apply for what is public. I read that only 40% of the jobs that are given out are really making it to be public. 60% is somehow managed through the network. There might be other statistics. I'm not sure that's the absolute right statistic, but that's for sure. You have to maintain your network and you have to, choose where or find out where there's an opportunity and choose who can help you to position you there.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. That both of those are really good bits of advice, and you're absolutely right. For all of us STEM listeners, thinking about network, and you can never start too soon building a network, even if it's your first year at university, to be thinking about who to connect on platforms like LinkedIn and various other GitHub, Stack Overflow. There's so many good tech platforms now where you can build communities, and you never know what one lead will come to.
You mentioned LinkedIn. I think honestly, like I said, I mean, years ago, jobs like I had now were exclusively given out through Headhunter, right? Because their asset was they had this candidate database. They knew who's who and who's where and who's eventually willing to change and who's usually known to be mobile and is even changing between countries or locations or whatever. That's gone. I mean, that asset is basically gone. The asset is now on LinkedIn, on a few other platforms, but certainly LinkedIn is one of the most known and probably most used. I mean, companies like ours. I mean, when I joined 5 years ago, I've been still brought in through a headhunter executive search company. Now, most of even the executive search is done with internal recruiter, and they use their own network and LinkedIn.
Yeah. And we see that from our side as well. So it's
and it's the same. You have to accept how the technology works, because with LinkedIn there is a recruiter module. So companies sign up for having a license as a recruiter, and then they put in a search, right? They put in CIO, and if your CV doesn't have the matching words, the keywords, then you don't stick out. So again, here for the graduates, I think it's very important. Think about how LinkedIn works, right? And think about what is needed that you come up in the search on the first page, because if you're not on the first page, no one looks on the second page. So that's how the world works today.
And it really is, isn't it? You can equate that to sort of Google searches. If you're not on the first search of a Google page, you might as well be on the 100th. So it's well, Christoph, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you. And it's great to have covered some really, really good topics, from understanding more about obviously SGS and the strategy that you put in, but to really deep dive into digital transformation, into data and the importance of security, and to have a real life examples of what you've had to do when navigating through COVID as well, and to finish on the career advice for a lot of our listeners. Thank you. Really, really good. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yes, it was great. Thank you. It was a great experience.
Great. And for all our listeners, this podcast, it's posted on the Arrows Group website, where you will be able to download it either via Spotify, Apple, YouTube, many other different platforms. And it's also live on our partner universities' career portals, where you'll be able to download the full podcast and reach out, obviously, to myself if there's any questions, anything you wanted to know further to this topic. So one more time, massive thank you to Christoph for your time.
Thank you, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
And here's to another show. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.